Welcome to Speakernomics, the official podcast of the National Speakers Association, brought to you by Leadership Books. I'm Kenneth Kinney, but friends call me Shark. And like you, I'm a professional speaker and I love listening to Speakernomics. It's the professional speaker show that will help you thrive and grow a speaking business so you too can change the world, one keynote, session, workshop, and speech at a time. And on this episode, we welcome René Rodriguez. He's a leading authority on leadership and influence, a Wall Street Journal bestselling author, keynote speaker, leadership advisor, and transformational speaker coach who uses behavioral neuroscience to solve some of the toughest challenges in leadership, sales, and change. René, welcome to Speakernomics. How are you today?
It's great to be here. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Well, now to all my speaking friends, how are you exerting influence in your speaking business? We hear that term all the time, influence, but we're not talking influencer. We're talking true influences with the audiences we serve. Are you using a neuroscience-based framework to amplify that impact? Or are you simply doing a lot of videos just to get likes and shares that exert none at all? And before we jump in, make sure to go to speakernomics.com. That's where you can find the tips, insights, and knowledge to help you become a better speaker, build a better business, and get paid to speak. René, let's dive in. So influence, as I said, is a term that's often thrown around so often today, but help identify what the term influence really means for people like us in the speaking business, where we can deliver a much bigger impact, and what that means that we need to change other than just all the social media nonsense that we see over and over.
Well, one, I'm glad that you differentiated between influence and influencer. You and I were chuckling about the difference between that earlier, and no diss to the influencers out there. And I know we're all—
You don't do shuffle dances in your keynotes.
No, yeah, unfortunately, no. But I'm sure they might. I might go viral for the wrong reasons, which is what we don't want. But no, I think when we look at this, there's, you said, how does it affect and why is it important to speakers? Well, we train hundreds and hundreds of speakers every year. And a lot of people want to be entertaining, but the reality, we're up on that stage to create influence and to influence an audience for the direction of whoever our sponsor is. And so a lot of times, if you're hired by a company, half of our job is to understand what's the strategic objective of that business and what are they trying to do, because they're giving the attention of their entire company to you for an hour or however long your keynote is, and you need to be an extension of that strategy. And that is one way to exert influence. So then that's the what. How we do it, and let's even define it, because I think it was Einstein, or it might have been Socrates or Aristotle. One of those said that the beginning of wisdom starts with a definition of terms. And so influence, to me, if we look at it, I look at it from its opposite. So imagine walking in a room and no one noticing, telling a joke and no one laughing, selling a product and no one buying, sharing an idea and no one caring, trying to cast a vision and no one following. And a lot of people will describe that as a pretty horrible experience. What feeling would you have, Kenneth, with that?
General feelings would probably be loneliness, things like that, where you feel like you're not wanted as much.
Yeah, and to me, the feeling is really of insignificant.
There you go.
Because here I'm trying to do something, and I would venture to say that the lack of influence is one of the worst of human experiences. I try to make an impact on the world, and I can't. I don't seem to do that. So if I'm in a meeting and I feel insignificant, I'd probably ask myself, why am I in this meeting? If I was in a relationship and I felt insignificant, I'd ask myself, why am I in this relationship? If I was at work and I felt that way, I'd be like, why do I work here? Unfortunately, a lot of people feel that way walking around life. They feel like what they do doesn't matter. And that begins a whole series of really sad and difficult questions. And so, to me, influence is so much more than persuasion and influence and selling. It is something much deeper. And I'll give you an example. So let's bring it back. You walk in a room, people notice. You tell a joke and people laugh. You sell a product, people buy. You share an idea and people love it. You cast a vision and you watch people mobilize and take action. What words come to mind now? What feelings come to mind?
Significance.
Significance, exactly. And so now here I do something and the world is responding. A lot of people think that comfort on stage is what matters. And I tell people all the time, I said, your comfort on stage doesn't matter, because I know a lot of people, I'm sure you do as well, that are very comfortable on that stage adding no value. And they lack that self-awareness to realize that no one's paying attention but you. And they're telling stories for the sake of telling stories. And there's no payoff at the end of those. And so I've also watched people that are extremely nervous, petrified, trembling over their words, but I want to change my life as a result of what they just shared. And so polish doesn't equal influence. Nerves don't equal the lack of it. And so once we start reframing that, really, if I know my significance, that means I know what impact I'm having. And if I know my impact, I know why I'm in that room, in that meeting, in that relationship here on this earth. So really, influence to me is at the core of what our purpose is. And when we can identify that, now we can exert that to create massive influence around the world around us, right? The world around us. And like right now, you're the world around me. There's nobody else in my room. And so, and this kind of goes to one of those other questions you had hinted at, but which we'll address at the end, but influencing that world around me is really about being present. And how do I really stay focused on, right now I'm on this podcast, you and I are having this great discussion. I really appreciated the pre-discussion to kind of get to know each other and, you know, the alignment that you and I have. And it just makes this even more engaging, more present for me and all those things. So that is sort of the beginning of where I would say influence is defined.
So tactically give us some insight into how speakers can demonstrate that influence, regardless of what kind of vertical that they're in. This is also something that you're going to be diving deeper into, coincidentally, at Influence NSA's conference in Denver in 2024.
So there's some hard realities when it comes to how people process information. And we have to take into account that when we look at influence and what it is we're doing. And one of those is that light travels faster than sound, meaning I visually see you before I hear you. So you may have great ideas, you may have a great voice, you may have all these things, but if visually something is off, that is going to have an impact. And there's a million ways it could be off. One, you know, for me, I had let my health go. I was an athlete, college athlete for a while. I let my health go. That was affecting my ability and my credibility for a long time, because people would, you know, the underlying statement, you know, I had great content and I was good at what I was doing, but man, if Rene can't manage his own self, how is he going to help manage us? And there's an integrity, even if it's unspoken, there's something there. Or if my hands are in what we call the fig leaf position, think of Adam and Eve, what they use a fig leaf. Sometimes we'll cover ourselves in that unintentionally, or our arms are crossed, or maybe our shoulders are hunched, or we're looking at the ground as we talk. These are all visual cues that illustrate things. And so the first thing we have to do is really master how we show up in our presence and visually still. Where do we put our hands? Eye contact and those different pieces. And when you can really understand the posture, how you walk in a room, the use of a smile, opening the curtains, which is your eyebrows, right, as you talk. There's so many different elements that really create that feeling of welcoming and trust and confidence. And the biggest thing that we can do to be confident was the opposite of what I used to think. I'd go to the clubs and I would just have this sort of look, you know, hard look on my face and thought that was cool. But really, what people want is a big smile. And so being able to enter with a smile and a confident one with the curtains open, those things are the first impression they're going to make. And then, of course, how you talk, what your voice tonality is like, your pacing. Are you using crutch words? Do you have a sense of self-awareness in the timing of your story? Or are you just telling a longer story? Are you picking up on social cues? There's so many different elements that sort of go into the experience one has about you.
So many people that we know, I'm sure you've seen many of them, who are considered good speakers and they don't know how to relax and smile on stage. And when they learn it, it could be such an amazing superpower, and it opens up so many things for people. And I've seen some people that were incredibly smart and they don't know how to just disarm a little bit with something as simple as a smile, but it can truly be a superpower to get people to lean in.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Where does AI play into influence? There's so many different ways that we can exert influence, and AI is really going to not interfere with it, but it's going to change the way we have learned this and can use more influence.
Well, the first thing is to recognize that it is a force that we're not going to stop at the moment, and it is coming. And so when I look at those things, I say, okay, just like anything, just because something's been abused. This is a quote from T.S. Eliot. He said, just because something's been abused does not neglect its use. And so some people abuse alcohol. It doesn't mean you can't have a drink. Some people abuse selfishness. Doesn't mean you can't be selfish and take care of yourself from time to time. And so AI, I think, is the same thing. It's going to be abused, but in the same way they're going to come up with ways to double check and triple check and call people out that just use AI. It's going to happen. And then someone's going to find a way to circumvent that check, and then they're going to figure out a way to do that. That's the process of technology. They call it the double helix. It's going to go in and out, and it's going to happen. But I look at it and say, okay, how can I embrace this as an idea? And to me, assisted writing, this is really what most people use it for in the beginning, most common use, is not a new thing. Even the Bible was written with pseudopictographers, people that wrote under a pseudonym. They didn't have the ability. They weren't scholars. They didn't have, they couldn't scribes. They couldn't use the tablets, and so somebody had to do it for them, and they had to write it under a pseudonym. And so it's been around. Ghostwriters have been around for a long time. We submit papers for people to edit. That's just a human editing. Well, I can then circumvent the human edit and have AI edit it for me. And what's interesting too is the smarter you are, the smarter you interact with AI. Like, it's like the AI can write you a great apology, but it can't deliver it. And it can do all sorts of things. It can write you a love poem, but it can't look somebody in the eye for you and speak it from the heart. It can write you a great speech, but it can't be the one out there moving an audience to tears. And so there's so many things around the delivery side of it where if we say, okay, how can I embrace it to be an extension of my thinking? How can I use it as a coach? Because I sometimes say, AI is a great coach. I say, coach me about how to understand, for example, quantum physics. Help me understand, but pretend I'm 10 years old. And it breaks it down. Give me some examples. And so I start using these examples and I start getting it. And I'm like, wow, that's a really fun example. And I can take that example to stage now. I can even go to them and say, what, I'm trying to create an experience where I want somebody to understand what influence truly is. And how's about it? What's a fun question I could use? Then it'll take me to things like the Moses illusion or semantic illusions. I'm like, oh, those are great ideas. And you can use it as sort of this creative partner when you really think about it as another human. And the brainstorming and piece. And so a lot of times I'll get ideas and I'll change 70% of the idea that it gives me. But I needed it to prod and to poke and to challenge me on this. I'll even tell it sometimes. I said, you know what? I want you to ask me at least 10 questions before you give me an answer. You're a pro at this. And then there's even some things to say when you can illustrate there's a consequence to not thinking deeply and thought thoroughly, that ChatGPT gets even more engaged. And we say, because I'll be writing something, and I'll say, and by the way, there's probably about 100 jobs that are really relying on an answer to create some sense of confidence. And if not, they might leave and go somewhere else. And all of a sudden, now ChatGPT sort of comes in and it digs in even a little bit further instead of giving a surface answer. So there's lots of ways to really think creatively with it without relying on it.
So talk a little bit about what you're speaking about at Influence this year.
So we're building off a little bit of what we did at Thrive. And what's fascinating, I was trying to explain to somebody, you're going to speak, I speak 239 days last year, constantly on the road, always on stages. And I said, but this is a very different audience. This is an audience of pros. These are people that have been there. They've done it. They're on the road the same way. And naturally, there's going to be a critic in the room. And when I say the critic on the shoulder, in the same way I am if I watch a speaker. And it's how do you engage with an audience that really knows this stuff really well? And so what I'm going to be doing, one is sharing what I've learned in 30 years of applying neuroscience. And how do we, wherever someone finds themselves, there's going to be some new people in the room, all the way to some of the best pros, the Hall of Famers. And how do we relook at some of the things that people knew already and give specific, tangible, actionable tools that they can go, you know what, I can use that. Or they go, you know what, I knew that, but that's a good reminder. But if we can think about how do we apply the science in a new way, that to me is going to be, so we're going to go through what we call the amplify formula. And the formula is based a process that we look at based on how the brain processes information and how, in essence, it constructs reality. So we listen to speakers, and this is one of the reasons we love storytelling. We love great storytellers because we use stories to create narratives. And those narratives are what the brain uses to construct reality as a construct. So, we know that there's a narrative to everything we do. In fact, we'll nerd out here for a second. Between ages 3 and 4, the brain realizes that there's narratives in life. It watches, your dad's hungry. So there's the beginning of the story, because a narrative is a beginning, a middle, and an end. Dad's hungry, beginning. Goes to the fridge and consumes something, middle. He's not hungry anymore, end. When hungry, engage in that narrative. And so we see these narratives, but between ages 9 and 13, we start realizing that these narratives are driven by values. Okay, this for some reason, Johnny's always over on Sundays. And I don't know why, but he's always over on Sundays. Come to find out, Johnny's family is working Sundays, so no one's there to feed him. So mom decided to invite him over. There's another narrative. When a kid is hungry, when Johnny's hungry, invite him into our family. By age 21, we realized that it's not just situational. It's not just with Johnny. It's if anyone's hungry, you invite him into our family. And you can see how those really positive narratives can be created based on the value set that we have. It can also happen the other way. Dad has a long day, comes home, screams at mom. She makes him a sandwich. So if I'm upset, just yell at my wife and she'll serve me. And there are people that really truly believe that. That's a narrative. It constructs how their reality is formed. And so when we talk about influence, and what I'm going to be doing is breaking down that process and saying, okay, how as a speaker, where we are the one on that stage, we have the attention. One, how do we capture attention? How do we get people to do something with that attention? And then more importantly, how do we help reconstruct, reframe, and re-narrate, whether it be business strategy, maybe life change, health change? The applications are endless. Whatever your niche is as a speaker, you're going to be able to use this methodology to drive the change that you need to drive, but at a real foundational level.
Great points. Looking forward to it.
At Primo Productions, we create video experiences that amplify your reach and enhance your hireability. With our speaker-focused video production and advanced editing, your message becomes an unforgettable visual journey. Elevate your presence, captivate more audiences, and open new doors. Visit our website at primoproductions.com, where your words meet our vision.
So, question I want to ask you that comes from a previous guest is, how can you be more meaningful with clients and attendees when you're off the stage? What are you doing?
I love that. I love that question. It's driven by something I said earlier, which is really focusing on the world around me. And it comes from this. I remember my first cassette tape was Tony Robbins, 17 years old. And then it was Zig Ziglar. Then it was Jim Rohn, Tom Hopkins, Wayne Dyer, going through the whole list of all the Nightingale Conant. I mean, I just had a membership. I just bought it all. And I remember finally getting a chance to see some of those people and watching them on that stage. And then they would get up and they would leave. Now, it created scarcity. So their value in essence went up. But I never created connection. And I always told myself, if I was ever one of those speakers, I'd want to be the one that could be hanging around ahead of time, shaking some hands. I usually will walk the audience, shake some hands ahead of time, because I always look at, this is our first time meeting. I don't want the first time us to meet for me to be on that stage. And I have shaken 800 hands before I've gone on stage. I've walked around, be there an hour early and just talking to people. Gets me a chance to know who they are. So then I get on stage. That's our second time meeting. They go, and by the way, when I'm in the audience ahead of time, half know I'm speaking, half don't, depending on the industry. Some industries are more well-known, some are I'm not at all. Some people saw some marketing materials, and some people are like, oh, hey, some weird bald guy is shaking my hand. But then when they see me on stage, they're like, wait a minute, hey, that's that guy that I didn't know he was speaking today. And so there's the second time we've met. Now, after I speak, I come off stage and I'm walking around, maybe it's a book signing or I'm just walking in the hallway or in the trade show. I see them again, they'll come up to me, and that's our third meeting. And so by that time, and then the key for me, and this is the hardest thing, is I function from, how do I influence the world around me? Too many people say, I want to influence the world. Well, the world isn't watching you right now. Right now, Kenneth, you and I are the only ones that exist in our current, present reality. Once this goes into the future, there'll be other people listening. But the best way to serve those of you listening is for me and Kenneth to be fully present in this conversation. So if I see you in a hallway, I will turn my shoulders, make sure that I'm facing you. I'm not doing one of these where I'm off and looking off to the side. Hey, nice to meet you. It's this, asking your name, doing that conversation at a minimum of 30 seconds. 30 seconds of focused attention is life-changing. They did this study on doctors and bedside manners, where they looked at, they studied them for 2 weeks, and they interviewed the patients afterwards. And they had them rate their bedside manner. And what they found was the doctors who were rated highest in bedside manner had one distinguishing factor, and that was they spent 30 seconds to focus attention. And so we always looked at that, and we say, okay, so we know we have 40 volts in our brain through neuroelectrical activity. And typically I am spreading that out, 10% over here, multitasking there, doing other things. But what if I took those 40 volts and I focus them for 30 seconds, and I meet you, and I say, Kenneth, nice to meet you. Do you like Kenneth or Ken? Awesome, Ken. Nice to meet you. What do you do? And we have this conversation and I stay there. And even there might be a million people around, I don't care. It's Kenneth and I talking, even if it's that 30 seconds, we can make a connection that's much deeper. And for me to have those the less but deeper connections is way more valuable. And so for me, it's about understanding that how do I meet them ahead of time? So I meet them up stage and I meet them afterwards. And then if I'm meeting you, to put everything that I know, just face the person, ask their name, say their name, take a true interest in a moment of what it is. And you talked about Cialdini earlier. One of his laws of influence is the law of liking. So instead of with it, where a lot of people try to get people to like them, stop trying to get people to like you, because that changes things. It makes us name drop and it makes us do all sorts of things. But instead, how can you proactively try to like someone? And law of liking says is we like people who like us. And so for me, if I take a deep interest, what do you do? They're asking about the presentation. I can answer any questions. Say, what do you do? What brought you here? And I love that question. You know, somebody said, well, what do you do? And I said, if you had a free day, no obligations, how would you spend it? It was one of my favorite questions to ask, because then you get a chance. Yeah, I already know you'd be swimming with sharks, which scares the living daylights out of me, but super fun. But, there's those pieces of how do we be really present in those moments? And it doesn't have to be hours, but even this 30 seconds can be pretty powerful.
I love every bit of it. It's the present of being present, which not enough people really take into account in life. So what is a question that you would like to ask a future guest on this show?
I would like to say that there's all different types of speakers on stage. What do you do to ensure that your impact doesn't leave the building when you do?
Love that. All right, let's do a quick recap then based on Rene's influential advice. Number one, we're on the stage to influence an audience, but it's not for likes and shares. It's an extension of the strategy for the sponsor of whatever that event is. So don't let yourself be insignificant. To be significant, reframe it by understanding the true impact that you can make. Number two, when you look at influence, especially the way we process information, don't forget to consider there are so many elements like just paying attention to your smile, the pace of your voice, and everything else that goes into it. That's the way that you're going to deliver a lot of that influence. Number three, recognize that AI plays into how you influence others. It's not something that can be avoided, but make certain that you don't just rely on it. Develop influence, but it won't necessarily help you on stage be influential. So keep that in mind. Rene, I can't wait to see you present at Influence in December or in Denver in August. Any last closing thoughts?
I think you just put ChatGPT to shame with that recap. I want some Kenneth GPT. Wow, that was incredible.
I'm trying. It's GP without a T. But how far I get. But any last closing thoughts before we get out of here and register for the show?
One, thank you for having me on. You're an incredible host. Great questions. And I am truly looking forward to meeting the folks in the community. And if you're listening to this and you're there, please come up and introduce yourself. Let's spend that 30 seconds or more. And
there's at least 800 hands for you to shake there. So
hey, I'm in. Let's do it. It's these are the times we all need to come together, support one another, and continue to learn. And I'd say that, if you see something that I do, steal it, use it, make it better, and then teach me what you did so you can make me better. That's how I look at things.
I'm a big fan of all the sessions that are going to be at Influence, but especially with anything neuroscience or behavioral science. And I'm excited to see you present. So friends, make sure to join us at speakernomics.com and let your voice be heard. Thank you to Leadership Books for sponsoring this episode. Again, I'm Kenneth Shark Kinney, your host of the National Speakers Association's podcast, Speakernomics, and this has been another fantastic and influential episode of the show. To everyone listening, thank you for the privilege of your time. And remember, Speakernomics is the podcast where you'll learn to speak, get paid, repeat.